You're listening to The Q Switch with your host, Spence.
Welcome, everybody to the Q Switch Conversation podcast. I'm your host, Spence, and the mission of this show is to tackle subjects currently impacting ophthalmology, where we bring in the innovators, the thought leaders, and forward thinkers shaping the field of ophthalmology to get their unique perspectives. This particular episode is a little different because I have my guest across the table from me, where normally we're on a screen. And today's guest is Dr. Arjan Hura. Thanks a lot for joining us today here at ASCRS 2026 here in DC.
Absolutely. What a pleasure, Spence. And I'm so proud of the work you've done with this podcast. We're stepping outside of our comfort zone. We're doing it in person here, words and all. So it's going to be great.
Indeed. So, for those of you out there who don't know who you are, I want you to share kind of your background, kind of your path, see where you're at.
Yeah, I'm a refractive and cataract surgeon. I practice in Los Angeles, California at the Loney Shandy Hura Vision Institute. My practice is exclusively focused on refractive surgery and refractive cataract surgery. And with that comes a lot of new technology, staying up to the latest advances. Even at this meeting alone, there have been multiple new lens technologies that have been launched. In the past 18 months, there have been many new lens technologies that have been launched. New additions to laser vision correction, new diagnostics for ICL sizing. The thing that keeps me most interested in this is that the pace of innovation is just relentless. Every year, multiple times a year, there's something new coming out, something novel. And in order to really give the patients the best outcomes, we have to stay up to date on things.
So, I like that you said that there's always technology coming out. Because I know you've been around this a while. I've been in the game a while. It almost seems like things come at too fast a pace, and it can get the waters muddy. Too many options, overwhelming for surgeons and patients. How do you navigate being able to narrow down these options, whether it's technology or lens, to the ones that really work best for you?
Once I feel curious and really passionate about what I do, keeps me a little bit ahead of things. So when a new lens comes out, I've been aware of it for the past year or two. Sort of peripherally, I've been aware of what's in the next. Or if I just look across the ocean to Europe and I see what technology they have, I know probably there's a good chance if there's something that's performing really well out there, our FDA will likely approve that maybe in the coming years here in the United States. I stay up to date with the literature. I listen to what our peers are saying, not just across the country, but across the world. I watch webinars. I read articles. I think as long as you are passionate about what you do, naturally you're going to be wanting to learn more and have knowledge about these things. And so I find I'm able to keep myself 2 to 3 years ahead of launching breaking news because of that. And then when new technology comes out, I've already been thinking about how would that fit into my practice, who would be the right patient for that, and I can apply it off of that. Obviously, if I have a chance to be involved in certain clinical trials or studies, I always relish those opportunities as well, because I can get early experience and that can really custom tailor that technology to the right patient.
So you're known for precision and customization, as you just mentioned. In modern vision correction, how do you define great vision for practices today?
Vision really all comes down to that individualization. So I think if we get too stuck on the objective, so whether patients say 20/20 uncorrected, 20/15 uncorrected, 20/10 uncorrected these days, we're losing sight of the broader picture, which is how is the patient utilizing their vision every week? How are they utilizing their vision from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed and close their eyes? We are perfectionists as refractive surgeons. When I see someone who's a 20/20 -2, okay, they're reading the 20/20 line. Why did they miss 2 letters? Is there anything I could do to make that a little better? But oftentimes that patient is super happy. They're thrilled with the vision. So I think it's important we not get lost in the weeds. We don't nerd out too much on the details. If you have a patient in front of you who's already really happy, vision comes down to, is the patient 20 happy? 20 happy, maybe 20/10 for some patients, 20/25 for others. Obviously, we always strive for the best outcomes, but I try not to take someone who's really happy and then make them a little bit less thrilled with the results, just because there's some numerical stat on my end that I would have really optimized.
So you offer a full range of vision correction solutions: LASIK, SMILE, EVO ICL, PRK, and refractive lens exchange. Why is it important to master all of them instead of focusing on just one or two?
Yeah, it's really important, I think, that patients see a surgeon who offers a full spectrum of vision correction, because there's an old saying, which is, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I often tell patients, just because we can doesn't mean we should. So yes, LASIK has been FDA approved for certain wafers to maybe correct up to -10, -12 diopters of myopia. It can treat a large amount of hyperopia, a large amount of astigmatism, but there's better alternatives for some of these certain cases. A -10 coming into my clinic, even though maybe technically they can have LASIK, I'm not doing LASIK for that. I'm not going to recommend LASIK for that patient, because I know their night vision, contrast sensitivity, quality of vision in certain settings will not be as optimal as if, for example, I use the EVO ICL, which can treat up to -16 diopters of myopia. So It's really about custom tailoring the solution to each patient, understanding not just their anatomy, not just the objective data, but their personality. What is their lifestyle like? What are their hobbies? What are their professions? What are their aspirations? And also, what are their expectations? And can we realistically meet those expectations? So if a patient comes in and, they're super nearsighted and they're already past the age of presbyopia and they don't like monovision and they still want the full range of vision correction, you may be limited in whether or not you can have the right option for that patient and whether that option can truly deliver the perfection they're looking for. Sometimes setting expectations realistically, sometimes bringing them down a little bit, and then trying to over-deliver on the result, that's where patient success happens.
So where do you see the biggest shift happening right now in ophthalmology and refractive and pellet surgery? And are we moving towards a lens-based solution like RLE or EVO ICL?
I think there'll always be a place for a lens-based solution and laser vision. And even in the past year, we've seen tremendous innovation on both of those fronts. So it really just, again, comes down to choosing the right patient, the right procedure. Maybe for 10, 15% of patients, they're just not a candidate for vision corrections. And that's okay. I tell patients there's nothing wrong with continuing in glasses. There's nothing wrong with continuing in contact lenses. But it's all else being equal. They have the right eye anatomy, they have the right personality, the right expectations. If there's a procedure I think that can really deliver an outcome, then I know I do things that are difficult. In terms of what is being infused into both lens-based vision correction and laser-based vision correction, I actually think AI is playing a very big role there.
Okay.
So in the past year, just last summer, the FDA approved Wave Light Plus, ray tracing. Okay. And that is really the first big innovation that's come to excimer laser vision correction in a very long time. Wavefront optimized, wavefront guided, both target guided LASIK, they've been able to give phenomenal outcomes. 2010, 2020, 2015 vision. Ray tracing LASIK, though, is actually utilizing AI and is taking the most thorough and customized approach to analyzing the patient's optical system that we've ever had before. So traditionally, we would do laser vision correction based on how well you see better one, better two.
Right.
That was okay, but the patient's cornea or optical system isn't one refractive mirror all the way from top to bottom or side to side. There's all these little hills and valleys that make every patient's optical system unique. And so previously, we had custom treatments designed to treat sort of that front part of the eye, but it was applied to this theoretical model of the eye. What ray tracing LASIK does is it images the entire eye from front to back and then custom generates a 3D sort of avatar of that patient's specific eye, and then applies a custom treatment to that individual's specific eye. And then using AI in iterations, it compiles treatment and says, okay, if light enters the eye, where's it going to land on the retina? And it does that thousands and thousands of times until everything is essentially on target or quote unquote perfect. And we've seen studies now coming from other parts of the world in 2023, the initial results, showing that almost 51% of patients are seeing 12 and a half, which is 2 lines better than 2020. Yeah.
So you mentioned
Ray tracing LASIK.
ray tracing LASIK. Obviously, an advanced technology. It's newer, obviously. So what are the must-have diagnostic and surgical technologies in your practice today that you simply could not do without? What you and your partners factor in to make those decisions versus the technology that maybe there?
Yeah, I think you can get really good outcomes without having every single piece of technology in the world. But at a practice like ours, we really pride ourselves on offering patients the best. And when it comes to refractive surgery or vision precision in terms of outcomes, technology makes a big deal. So we want to offer best in class LASIK. And we feel, especially given the latest updates, that's in the form of ray tracing technology. When it comes to EVO ICL surgery, you can use multiple different biometers or topographers to figure out the sizing, but we really wanted to understand predictability. How is each diameter ICL going to sit the patient's right eye and left eye? And so we utilize actually UBM technology, ultrasound technology, with, again, AI in the form of what's called ICL Grid Pro to image the patient's eye and then have a prediction in terms of what is that patient's bulk going to be for every size ICL for their right eye and for their left. And so that level of precision and predictability before surgery really gives us confidence we're going to nail the outcome we want and patients expect.
And we started out, you talked about customizing some of the vision, and I think some of the tools, technologies, AI, so allowing you to really customize to that patient and even to each eye of the patient, because their right eye might not be the same as their left eye.
Yeah, it's an era of, I think, personalized vision correction that we've wanted for a long time and we've been working towards. But even if we take a step back and we just look at medicine as a whole, when I was growing up and I was in high school, there was this promise of personalized medicine that was going to come out. And yes, nowadays, in terms of genetic testing and all sorts of other things, we're seeing the ability to tailor treatments to a unique individual based on their DNA, based on their individual scenario versus the population at large. A lot of that has already been possible with vision correction, but ray tracing just takes that to a whole level. And you can view that from a macro standpoint also in terms of how can we custom tailor the chances of having the best outcomes for a patient if we have the most advanced diagnostic technology. You can achieve those outcomes without that technology, but there's maybe a bigger chance of missing the market.
So you practice in Beverly Hills, probably one of the most competitive markets in the country. What does it take to stand out and stay on top in LA?
I think, again, being really curious and passionate about what you do, goes a really long way. So all I do when I'm at work is I'm focused on work. When I'm in the operating room, I'm focused on surgery. And then when I go home, all I do is I focus on work. And I think about what I'm focusing on research or how can we improve the patient experience at our practice. So I happen to practice at a place that has a very high touch patient experience. We really pride ourselves or strive towards giving patients really the best medical experience they've ever had. We want people to leave our office after surgery and be like, wow, that was the best doctor's appointment I've ever been to. And that comes from just being obsessive about the little details. From the moment a patient finds us, whether that's on our website or social media, from the moment they walk in, the lighting in the room, the warmth and energy and personality of our first impressions to you, all the way to how we make the patient feel as we get to know them on their journey to vision correction. I think just really focusing on that and not really caring so much about the noise and the competitiveness of maybe a certain region or city. If you focus truly on what you do, you try to be the best you can be at your craft and what you do. Eventually, patients are going to see that, the outcomes are going to be there, the reality and data is going to be undeniable, and word of mouth will spread.
So one of the things that I've been researching for this episode is you have, ArjanHura.com. It's your own personal branding. What role has that played in you being effectively competitive in LA and elsewhere?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Not a lot of people, I guess, know that. That's not really a website I ever created with the purpose of what I do now. I actually reserved that domain name when I was a fourth-year medical student.
Really?
Because I understood that your digital domain or real estate is important. So you don't want someone to take davidspence.com away from you and start masquerading with you. So I actually only did it for that. But it's interesting because I put some of my personal hobbies and interests on the website. For example, I've been doing since 2007. Over the years, or the past decade and a half, patients have come in and they say, "Oh, I see you've been doing martial arts, or you've done karate, or you volunteered at X, Y, and Z hospital." And so that's just naturally led to conversations. And I love getting to know patients, but I think patients enjoy getting to know their surgeon as well. And oftentimes we'll see patients, and they may be with us for an hour or 2 hours in the clinic. And then we do their surgery, which is maybe 10, 12. But often we don't really see them many times after that. And so that's where I honestly take a lot of pleasure in, is spending time like this with the patient, getting to know them. I already know the objective information beforehand. Unless there's something on exam that's going to sort of change sort of the game plan in my head a little bit. It's really then about really getting to know their individual scenario, custom tailoring everything to their life and focus. So I apply that to all aspects.
What I think is important and relevant about that is that in today's healthcare ophthalmology, the patient experience is the ball. And if you don't provide that next level patient experience, it's going to take away from, the referral base. And it's a reflection of online, obviously. If 5 stars is the thing. So instead of being transactional, maybe in years past, having that personal relationship with those patients is absolutely critical.
I think about this a lot when I travel. And I stay at a hotel, or I order food, or do something, or buy something from a business, and I get really poor customer service because this is all I do day in, day out. If that person on the other line was just like a little bit more friendly, maybe they've had a really crazy day. Who knows? Maybe someone in the family died. Who knows what life scenario they're having? But they just modulated their voice a little differently, or they just were willing to be a little patient. What a world of a difference it would make from first impressions. So I actually take a lot of things away from other industries outside of vision correction or ophthalmology or medicine at large. So if I go to a hotel and the front desk person is super nice and accommodating, I recently got married and I went on a honeymoon, and some of the places you stayed at, the service was phenomenal. And the whole time I was taking notes. I'm like, oh my gosh,
wow, okay.
We could do such a better job of doing this. Or, if a patient comes in and we greet them like this, it would make them feel so much better. So I draw inspiration from everywhere. Ophthalmology, refractive surgery is such a niche subspecialty. The whole world out there's so much knowledge and customer service experiences taking place on a day-to-day basis. And I think we can learn a lot from other people around the world, other industries.
So the healthcare in general thing is changing. Ophthalmology in particular, because of private equity, lots of mergers and acquisitions, large hospital systems, and your practice, Maloney and Shimi Hura is fiercely independent, like several others. And so with the rise of private equity, what's your perspective on the future of independent practices?
Yeah, I guess there's two ways I can respond. It's like politically correct, or I can be very politically incorrect. I firmly believe in remaining independent, and I think that is how we can continue to offer best-in-class patient care. I think when things too corporate, I think when someone's sitting in an office in another state is pulling the strings of how the patient experience is going to be, I think that's when things suffer. And unfortunately, I've seen that throughout my career. So I've been in cities or at places where they were not private equity, and then they sold to private equity or they merged with capital partners. And then I got to see over many years how that changed the patient experience. And often the changes are very small at first. A lot of times it's the staff who suffers. Maybe small changes to benefits or PTO or time off, or just being micromanaged, or staff now having to be very heavy-handed in how their day-to-day life at work is being discontent initially from there. But that ultimately then affects the staff, their quality of life at work, which then sometimes will affect the quality of the work they're doing. That affects the patient experience, and all of that trickles up. So then when we as surgeons are sitting down and we're going to do a surgery, we didn't have the best data or the best information about a patient. And, there are going to be rare scenarios where then that patient's outcome is doing some option. So I'm very happy that we are independent. We're not interested in private equity. I think the world of healthcare is changing. We're seeing more and more PE consolidation, but there's always going to be room. I think it's specifically in ophthalmology. It's one of those specialties where we're able to operate in private practice. I think there's always going to be a room for that. Just as in other sectors of industry or business, you can go to a large chain and try and buy a product in there, or maybe there's a standalone place that they only have one location. Your favorite burger joint maybe only exists in one place versus a McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's, which is just sort of the same stuff everywhere.
So, as a vendor, industry, private equity, again, not to take away from that whole business model. I'm sure they do great work. Obviously, surgeons are phenomenal, and so are all the rest of the support personnel. But from an industry standpoint, if surgeon loves, the MRQSLT or whatever product it is from us, as much as they love it, they get handcuffed by corporate because the money's not there. And so it does create some barriers to be able to acquire technology that the surgeon truly believes is going to get the best outcomes for the patient, but also add efficiency to the practice. And so I think that's something that should be worked on from a private equity standpoint, so these larger entities where things are quite bureaucratic. But yeah, there's I think some areas they can improve on where someone like yourself, if you like something, decide you see is going to be the best for a patient, you just pull the trigger.
It's such a good point, because we're on the industry floor here. We're at ASCRS 2026 in Washington, D.C. If myself and my partner in our practice, we see a technology and we think this is going to be good for patient care, for the patient experience, we're going to get good outcomes, better outcomes utilizing this, we can make that decision and buy the technology, have it implemented every day in our practice. And it just becomes a part of our normal workflow. If you're in an environment where you've sort of lost some of that autonomy and you're not the decision maker and you have to go and run something by a board and then it has to go to another committee, now it's 3 months that have gone by, things move like molasses. So the ability to make quick decisions, get the latest in technology, sometimes it's independent private practices that are able to offer that versus a large corporate environment. Ophthalmology is kind of unique in this aspect where a lot of the innovation has come from the private sector. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of areas of medicine where it's at the academic centers or universities where a lot of innovation or breakthrough treatments and medicines have come from. In ophthalmology, again, because of everything we just discussed, because of the environment and the ability to buy a technology or start a clinical trial fairly quickly, because the environment is full for that, a lot of innovation has come from the private sector. And that's something I really enjoy, is being able to be a part of clinical studies or clinical trials, get my hands on technology early on, give feedback, see it iterate and go through many versions before it ultimately becomes commercialized. Again, I think it's just be passionate about what you do. If you're passionate about what you do, you'll enjoy everything that comes with it, and it's all synergistic. It all just benefits patients.
But that's really great summary, because I know that throughout your career, even, I'm sure this far back as med school, but you love and have done really well with the research side of ophthalmology and medicine. And you still, to this day, while you're practicing now, and your partners engage in research, being like basically a retail establishment with, Refractive, and you guys have a very busy practice. How do you find time to invest in research and get good data for those companies that are looking to develop the next great technology?
Again, it all comes down to passion. But right before I sat down with you, I was talking to another team, and we were talking about potential future studies that could be conducted, ideas for research or clinical questions that maybe we could look into to try and figure out answers. It's not like I work on research exclusively once or twice a week. I don't do that at all until it's after hours, right? So weekends, plane trips, and that's when all the extra stuff comes in. Now, my focus on research has shifted. So maybe early on in my career, I was much more in, when I was in undergrad, I did bench research, right? I worked in a lab, microbiology lab, that sort of stuff. And then it became translational, and now it's essentially all clinical. So I don't really do basic science research anymore. What's easiest for me to implement is I just do what I do on a day-to-day basis. I treat patients, I try to give them the best outcomes possible, and I can utilize technology, and then I can look at the results and say, okay, here's how this technology is performing. This subset of patients seems to be doing best with this. And that can be done in a retrospective manner, looking back at the last year or two worth of patient care and saying, okay, what trends are we seeing? Or it can be partnering with industry to evaluate a new technology and say, okay, we're going to do a prospective study or trial. Let's utilize this for the next 50 patients or so and see how things are performing. And the beautiful thing about being in the United States, although this may be changing, even though we are often last or pretty slow to receive updates in technology, the benefit of being last in technology is it's been vetted elsewhere in the world. So our patients really, for the most part, are not guinea pigs. It's not like we're doing things where it's like, well, who knows what's about to happen. These technologies have been vetted, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of surgeries have been done across the world. And then when things have been refined, then they come to the United States. And because of the research and development process, it still has to go through proper clinical trials and studies. But oftentimes these patients, sometimes at no cost if they're willing to participate in the study, can benefit from the latest technology and really do well.
So as we finish up here, if there was one principle that defines your approach to vision correction and patient outcomes, what would it be?
I am just very obsessed about what I do. And I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. And because of that, my mind never stops working when it comes to these sort of things, vision correction. And I think if you can find something in life, it doesn't have to be ophthalmology or some other area of medicine. If you really find something you enjoy doing, you'll just be able to take it and run with it. People often say you need to follow your passion. You need to do X, Y, and Z. That's not necessarily always the case. You need to do something where you're able to obviously make a living, pay the bills, have a roof over your head. Once that stuff has been established, then I think it's really important to just take your passions and run with it. And then sometimes those passions become your primary profession or what you're doing. I went through a lot of different vetting of specialties before I even discovered ophthalmology. And then because it took me so long to even discover ophthalmology, when I started residency, I said, I want to explore every subspecialty possible so that when the time comes to potentially apply for fellowship, I'm not being forced to make a hasty decision. When I realized I really loved refractive surgery, I knew that fairly early on in residency, and then that allowed me to really narrow my focus when it came to extracurricular things like research, to really taking a deep dive into these topics. And then after that, I did a refractive surgery fellowship.
So there are some patients that also follow the show, and refractive surgery tend to being an elective surgery that have pocket space. If people are listening or watching the show, what's the one thing you suggest understanding before choosing a modern vision correction procedure?
I think just understanding that we are fortunate in 2026 and beyond to have many different options. So a lot of people in the United States have heard of LASIK. LASIK is sort of brand name.
Yeah, it's legacy, right?
It's legacy. Just like Kleenex, you think about tissue, it's like it's Kleenex. But there's so many different options that are just as good as LASIK. And for certain patients, some options may be better. So that's one. It's important to understand there's a lot of different options. It's all about custom tailoring the solution to that patient's needs. But you can't really have that unless you go to a practice or see a surgeon who offers this respective vision. So if I think someone really wants good outcomes, I say go to a surgeon who does all the surgeries, is involved with research, is involved with clinical trials, is up to date on the latest things, is teaching, is going to conferences. They might go to 10, 12 meetings a year to teach, but also to learn. After this, I'm going to teach refractive surgery for other surgeons who are maybe trying to learn how to do LASIK. I mean, this is all I do. So I think if you go to someone who loves what they do and is truly a master at everything, you're going to get a very unbiased opinion, and it'll be really a recommendation that's best for the patient. And again, the final point here is it's okay to just continue in contact lenses. So don't be too disappointed if you come in and there's something unique about trying out, and you may not be a good candidate for any procedure. That's just how some people are. And I have some family members like that. Both my parents had LASIK way back in the day, old school LASIK. I had LASIK over 10 years ago. My parents and I were seeing great, but I have some loved ones who's just not a candidate for LASIK, or they're not a candidate for ICL, or they're not a candidate for something else. And that's okay. It's unfortunate. It's heartbreaking. Sometimes people have their hopes and dreams sometimes set on having good vision and be free from glasses and contact lenses. But it's not for everyone. And I think patients should want that honest feedback with the surgeon, corners, or just, again, try to hammer a nail, because that's all they.
Last question. So, it's not even close. You are by far the best dressed ophthalmologist in the game. Your personal style, the way you trail your suits. I mean, where'd that come from? It's not in how you project your image in your professional.
I thought I was dressed pretty decent, and then I saw you across the floor. Oh my gosh! All right. Oh gosh. You know what? When I grew up, I had no semblance of fashion or style. And I still don't really think I'm really super deep into that. But one thing I was never taught from a young age was fit. So the way the clothes fit, I think actually matters much more than is there some nice pattern or stylized design or something fancy. And so you could take the simplest clothes, a crew neck t-shirt, and if the fit is good, you're going to look really good. So if anyone's interested in ophthalmologist fashion advice, I would say go for fit over fashion.
So if someone wanted, and any of our listeners or people who follow the show wanted to get in contact with you, follow us in these subjects, the initial cost on those things, for just maybe if there's a patient wants to come see you, this in the LA area, what's the best way to get it?
Yeah, I'm on most major social media platforms. My handles are all the same: Arjan Hura, MD, ARJAN HURA FD. I practice in Los Angeles, California. I would say most of the patients are from Los Angeles, but we have patients who travel to us from all over the world. So if you're interested in seeing if you're a candidate for vision correction, I'm happy to see you either in person, or sometimes the best start is actually just doing a virtual consult or a phone call. And if you've been seen elsewhere locally and you happen to have some testing or images, oftentimes I can review that online and go over that with you. And that can maybe save your trip if you end up not being a candidate for a procedure. But maybe everything looks good. And then when we see you in clinic, sometimes we can do the surgery the same day.
Well, I'm Spence. This is Dr. Arjan Hura. We're here at the ASCRS 2026 in DC. Thanks again.
It's been an honor and pleasure. Thank you, Spence.
Thank you, folks. Take care. Oh, and we gotta certainly give a shout out to our partners, Passion Media, who helped make this happen. And of course, our benefactors, Meridian Medical, for making it all possible. Thanks again, and see you in the next one.
You're listening to The Q Switch with your host, Spence.